Welcome, friends. Let us together rebuild this world so that we may live, laugh, and lore.
I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
Not listening. I'm not listening.
Oh, that took.
Program loaded and ready.
Make it so.
Welcome to the
Live, Laugh, Lore podcast.
We're your hosts. I'm Tony.
And I'm Mark.
And
We're in for another Star Trek episode.
Mark, can you just feel
The
my
Final
excitement?
Frontier.
Can you feel my excitement radiating through
yes.
my body right now? I actually just made a Star Trek joke today. Our internet's been out, so that's why a lot of our notes is gone. But our internet's been out, and Jenna was looking at me. She's like, what the heck are we going to do? And I literally did the first few scenes of Star Trek The Next Generation. So it's like, pan left, Farpoint Station, the NCC 71 Class T. You know what I mean? I did the whole thing. Yeah, we were just joking around because it's like, what do? You're like twiddling our thumbs and stuff. But we got, the Hobbit and stuff like that.
Wear a bald cap and play a flute too?
Oh, I should have. I really should have. I didn't have a ball cap. I do have a recorder. I should have,
Yeah.
started doing that out. Oh, Mark, yeah,
See?
yeah, Enter Light, baby.
Picard.
Yeah, dude. Oh, so Mark, you said Star Trek overview, right? And so the way that I was kind of looking at this was to first go out and say, like, okay, if someone were to come up to me and say, like, elevator pitch, what's Star Trek, right? Because I feel like it's so funny. People say Star Trek and Star Wars, but if you pulled someone off the street and said, like, okay, in like 5 sentences, how would you explain Star Wars? I bet a lot of people could probably guess around it and like actually get some main storyline points. But I bet you if you said, okay, explain Star Trek, I feel like a lot of people would just like falter off.
Yeah.
So just for fun, like, how would you even, like, now you've seen a few episodes, so I'll give you that. But like,
well,
do you think you really could?
I couldn't, and I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm the one who suggested this episode, not Tony, even though he's the guru. But
I was amped when you suggested it.
Because there's so many series, and I don't know how the series fit in the timeline.
Yes.
Like, I think Captain Kirk came before Picard, but I don't really know.
Yeah, gun to your head, you're right. Yeah. And it's crazy because there's so much there, I think. So it's like funny, it's like you can probably say the spirit, and maybe Star Wars is the same, but you can say like the spirit of Star Trek, right? It's just, discovery, right? The Final Frontier, these are the voyages of Star Trek Enterprise. You know what I mean? It's ongoing motion to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life, new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. It's like,
right.
You know what I mean? There's your 5 sentences. That's what Star Trek is. But
I think a lot of people would just give you the Vulcan sign.
Yeah,
that you split the fingers, right? Live long and prosper.
Yeah,
I would say
hilarious.
80%. That's the only thing they know.
Which,
about.
I mean,
And
they're right.
Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah, the years. Yeah, or they do the William Shatner. Yeah. It's because his is like Christopher Walken, right?
Yeah.
Everybody mimics them, man. I think we talked about it on the podcast before, but there's actually an acting school that's like a really big, like, that's a icebreaker, and it kind of opens up the room a little bit. They say, like, do a Shatner, which is like you just over dramatize everything and you just make talk in a very strange voice, and kind of gets you up to the improv. But yeah, so when Mark first kind of posed that question to me, it's so funny because it's so, like, I love Star Trek and I've watched every part of Star Trek, which is insane. It's so many hours. It's like Paul watching One Piece, right? It is so many hours. But I think it's so funny because Star Trek kind of lives in their own little, like, stovepipes. It's like its own little vacuum.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to watch it all to, like, appreciate it, right? Like, that's the fun part about Star Trek, I think, is it's so episodic and it's so, like, I just want to watch something that makes me kind of think deeply, and I can enjoy some really old sci-fi. And that's like Star Trek in and of itself, right? Which is great. So for general listeners and viewers that they're like, hey, I just want to kind of get that feel, you can literally pop in any Star Trek and start watching it. And you're not going to be sitting there kind of scratching your head like, hey, what the heck's going on? With one exception, and I'll talk about that in just one quick second. But so now let's kind of go back on it, right? I'm kind of doing like an induction almost, where I'm going very general, saying, hey, if you like old Star Trek, sci-fi, you're going to like Star Trek anywhere.
Before you move on, I got a question. And I think you mentioned it in the last Star Trek episode. But to remind our listeners, because I remember it, right?
Oh, okay, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Who is the George Lucas of Star Trek?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Gene Roddenberry was the original starter. But I will say Gene Roddenberry, he's created Star Trek. and he went all the way through the Next Generation, most of the Next Generation actually, and I think he passed away like season 5 or 6 of Next Generation. So what's wild is that George Lucas just recently gave up the reins. So we've been in a Star Wars world without George Lucas at the helm for maybe a couple years. But like, I'm pretty sure...
a couple years? Didn't he sell it to Disney like 10 years ago?
Was it 10 years ago? God, we're old. Ooh,
It's before it's
ooh.
before the sequel trilogy, which came out in college, right?
Oh crap!
We're
Okay,
old.
all right, never mind. Redact that statement. Redact my statement. But it's funny because when you're talking Star Trek, there's a way different because Gene Roddenberry did I think it was in the 90s when he passed away, and they're still making Star Trek. So I mean, it's 20, 30 years now. So does that kind of make?
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
if that But Gene, to answer your question, quick question, Gene Roddenberry. He's the originator of Star Trek.
Okay.
So, yeah, and so kind of like how I would talk about, let's talk about the creative thought process there, because that's important. That's why when I talked about the general stuff, I think that's where really gets into where Star Trek, the original series, because originally it was just called Star Trek.
Yep.
There was technically, they didn't have the idea of original series because they didn't know if they were going to extend it or anything like that.
Kind of like Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. It was just called Star Wars when it was originally released.
Yes, exactly. Good call. Man, they should put some more faith in there. What's going on? Yeah, shouldn't they know they're making multi-billion-dollar companies? But yeah, so what ended up happening is that Gene Roddenberry kind of came in and was like, he really liked sci-fi. He really liked the idea of kind of pushing the envelope. But it was tough because at the time which they were in, they were very big envelopes, like with all TV, right? And even now, there's rules in TV you don't necessarily break, right?
Yep.
You just kind of want to have a fun, snappy episode that really grabs the user's attention, and that's it. Where Gene was kind of going, okay, I really want to tackle some real life problems, but no one wants to sit down on a lecture on morality or philosophy. So here's what I'll do. I'll put it in the guise of sci-fi. I'll make it into a snappy episode. But these things that they're experiencing are the human condition, but they're happening to a Vulcan. And somehow that kind of breaks the envelope a little bit, and they can talk a lot, more. Heck, the first interracial kiss forever happened on TV was on Star Trek.
With Spock and...
It was actually Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura.
Okay. Yeah.
So, crazy episode there. But then they had more after that, but they were technically the first one, which is crazy to think about that was in this franchise's history, is that's what's happening. So not only were they tackling real life situations, no joke, on the actual TV industry, but let's even take a step back. They were talking about Spock is half human, half Vulcan. He's living in both worlds. What happens? And there's so much more nuance to that and depth. And I think that's what he was trying to capture. But he's also trying to make a really nice, fun sci-fi with all these LED buttons and, breaking the chains on, this is how we visually see FX now on, TV show. Where, they went from their first alien to be a dog with a hat. They're whoa, you know what I mean, alien. To all the way to, they had, popsicle, paper mache, ships that they're blowing up. And it was, unreal. It really set the basis and tone for all other sci-fi. Where, George Lucas is now can do... I mean, look at our Starfighter, fights that we see nowadays. It's
insane.
All that built up due to this. And so, sorry, that got a little more philosophy than I care to do, but the reason why I'm bringing that up is that was that was Gene Roddenberry's original thought process for Star Trek, which was the original series, which is very episodic. You're hitting these big points, and it kind of starts covering the life and, trials and tribulations of James T. Kirk, who's the original captain of the Enterprise.
From Riverside, Iowa.
Exactly. And actually before him is Captain Pike. So the first couple episodes of the original series is Captain Pike, which was the pilot. So they showed Captain Pike, they did the pilot, and they went, I don't know about this guy. And then they changed it to James T. Kirk. So then they just had him take over the Enterprise. And then Pike was he gave the reins, and there's stuff that happens with him. I don't want to do too many spoilers, but it's just a lot of fun that there was... the studio liked it, but they kind of want a little more oomph. And then their little more oomph was, James T. Kirk, which is really kind of funny to think about. William Shatner. But that one is no joke. I don't know if space opera is the right term. Probably not. But it's just it's very whimsical because it's so funny looking back at it because this was breaking technology. They had buttons that opened up doors, like pneumatic doors, which were really just two stagehands opening it up. So like, I think if someone was gonna be like, hey, should I watch the original series? My question would be like, do you really want to see the evolution of sci-fi and like really enjoy, like put yourself back in that time and seeing what's going on? Then I would 1000% do it. Like, is it the most depth ever? Yeah. You know what I mean? Is it like the most visually appealing? Like, not really. It's actually so bad it's good, kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
This is
about?
like the 60s we're talking about.
Oh yeah,
right?
big time. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is that sometimes I watch Star Trek to go to bed, and I literally can't watch the original series because the sound mixing is so, because they're on a starship, so they're like, it's kind of like a submarine. There's always going to be like a Doppler blip. So like if you listen to the original series, I'm sorry for breaking everybody's what's that How I Met Your Mother when she was like Lily chews really loud and Marshall's like because now he can't hear it. It's like break the glass or whatever.
Yeah.
Same thing with this one. Like every single second of the original series has some blip, thunk, computer noise, something, because it's just kind of they want you a more immersion, right? You know, so.
How it would be on a spaceship.
That's how it would be on a spaceship. And I think the sound editing guys in the next few series were like, okay, let me back off. But the reason why I'm kind of balking at trying to put the original series into a box, being like, hey, I would recommend this to someone if you want to watch this, is it's too difficult because they cover so much and there's so much going on. And that was kind of like their first run-in with this, so they didn't really know what they were doing. So I can't really being like, all in all, I can't be... Well, it really just... They're on a starship, they're going to different planets, and they're experiencing the human condition on those planets. About it. That's exactly what it is, right? And then I think they extended that out. So that's the first series ever created, was the original series. Then what they did was they created the Next Generation. So this was the 1701. So, sorry, the USS Enterprise 1701 is the first Enterprise. That's on the original series. The next series follows the NCC 1701 Class D with Jean-Luc Picard. Now, you might say, wait, what happened to A? Well, technically, the original series had 0 and A, like 1701 and then 1701A, but they don't really talk about B and C. Now, it's covered in a movie where they had a B, they had a C, but the whole point is that they try to get away a little bit from James T. Kirk and Picard. So they're kind of like saying, hey, there's some distance here. It's the same Enterprise that you know and love. They're going to different planets. They're experiencing this. They're, trying to do what Starfleet would do, which is like their organization that they're kind of exploration for, is Starfleet. Yeah, so that's Captain Picard's ship. But now we start getting into like the nitty gritty, because now like the studio has confidence in Star Trek.
Yes.
So now instead of having like 3 seasons that they never knew they were going to get another episode, so all the episodes were like extremely episodic, like meaning like you can at any point you can just go on one of those random episodes and you're kind of fine. Now in the Next Generation, you can still do that, but it's a little bit tighter. Now they're like actually building up people, where like it was just Kirk and Spock. And then you might get a Lieutenant Uhura, you might get a Sulu, you might get a Chekhov, you might get a Scotty, but they were like blips. But now they're like actually trying to build out their bridge crew. So now there's more episodes, or like Worf-centric episodes. Worf's like their tactical officer, and like bring it out more. And so I would just say, if I would recommend now the the Next Generation to somebody, I'd be like, it's the original series on steroids, where they're being very episodic. They're going to those places. They're experiencing these things. But more importantly, they're building out their characters more. They're fleshing out more of the characters. And they're still tackling, like, modern-day problems. Yes. Like, you saw, Inner Light.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, come on. Yeah, I mean, they're hitting out bangers. Like, so those episodes are still really solid. But, keep in mind, it's very episodic still.
Yes.
Because, by the way, like, I should also mention, when I say episodic, meaning from the title to the end sequence, it's a full story.
Yeah.
Front to back. Like, yeah, you might like not know what a character is, but they'll say the name, and you might not know the full background, but it's not like that's bogging you down. Where like any other series now, like with nowadays TV shows, like you actually rarely see an episodic TV show. Because
they all build on each other.
They all build on each other. It's all series.
Now, is there a background underlying plot that builds on each other? Because there's I like to show White Collar. It was all about solving white collar crimes, but in the background, he was trying to figure out what happened to his ex-girlfriend Kate, who supposedly died in a plane crash. Now you would only get like I said, each
You
episode
get like breadcrumbs.
Right, so there would be like, the final scene would be another clue to that puzzle, but the rest of the episode was he was solving a completely different crime.
Yeah. So I would say original series, absolutely not. The Next Generation, you get hints, but man, Deep Space Nine, that is like no joke. Like a full season was like that kind of show.
Okay.
So the reason why, so actually let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
So, like I said, Deep Space Nine was the first time they ever did that. And actually, on arrival, people did not like Deep Space Nine. Fundamentally, they really hated it.
Just because it was so different?
It was so different. So, for example, we just went from original series and the Next Generation, which, by the way, I'm going to cap on Next Generation. It's basically exactly what I said, right? It's just a steroids version of the original series.
Yeah.
But
So just for our awareness, 60s time frame,
Yes.
original series. Mm-hmm. Then how many years to next
we're
gen?
looking late 80s,
Okay.
early 90s for Next Generation. Then the very tail end of the Next Generation spun off Deep Space Nine and Voyager.
Okay.
So Voyager is now 90s, early 2000s. Same with Deep Space Nine, 90s, early 2000s. So much so that they wanted more continuity because they knew they were going to do something different. Let's do the Deep Space Nine, and then I'll do Voyager because it's kind of hard they're on the same timeline. But that's exactly the timeline. So if you were to do that, it's exactly how the Starfleet, or Stardate, timeline works out as well, right? Original series, Next Generation. Now you get Voyager and Deep Space Nine kind of co-located.
Yeah.
So the reason why, to bring back your other point with those breadcrumbs in that overall series, let's talk about what the time was like. We know this, which is wild to think about, is we couldn't control our TVs. You put on a channel, that channel would then have the episode on it, and you just watch what was ever on TV. You didn't decide what episode. You don't decide anything like that. And so that's why those episodic ones were so... It was such a formula and good for the time because the users weren't choosing what episodes. They were just going to the Sci-Fi Channel and went, Star Trek. All right, great. And they'd watch whatever episode. Because you can pick it on and off. You don't need a lot of that exposition. And like I said, there's a little bit in Star Trek. The Next Generation. Jeez, it's hard to do. But the Next Generation, a little bit, because there was episodes that were like part 1 and part 2. For example, Unification. One of the first times. That's the people. It's like, once again, a great episode. I didn't have you watch it, but Spock is in that. Leonard Nimoy's in it in the Next Generation.
That's cool.
And it's like actually his character. And like, but it was one of the first times where they did a part 1 and part 2. But they had Spock come in, so it was like so important. But it was kind of interesting because the first 5 minutes of that episode was re-explaining what happened in the first episode, like a full recap that was baked into the episode, because if people turned on their TVs and they missed episode 1 or the first part 1, they wouldn't be missing out on the next episode because they wouldn't be sitting there going, what the heck's going on?
Yeah.
So that was kind of really important. And so they literally had to cut airtime into that next episode just to re-explain what happened. So it was like almost like a balancing act, right? Like, how much do you want to do this? Because if someone turns on their TV and they miss part 1, this is going to make people upset. And that's exactly what happened in Deep Space Nine. So, for example, we have the Alpha Quadrant, right? The spaces is kind of divvied up in multiple quadrants, but let's just talk about the Alpha Quadrant, which is like home base. So the original series and Next Generation are in a starship traveling around the planets of the Alpha Quadrant. And they're kind of going the far reaches of the Alpha Quadrant, but they're still staying in the Alpha Quadrant. So that was good. They're traveling around, they're in a spaceship, everything's going well, it's very episodic, everything's going. So Deep Space Nine was such a whiplash for people because now they're on a space station. Space station stationary. Mm-hmm. It's not going around to all these new planets.
Right.
So what happens? How do you write episodic television when you're in the same spot? That's got to get boring, right? So then now they're turning completely on its head, because now instead of focusing on these new planets and new aliens and everything like that, they're now focusing on building out these characters into just rock solid formation, like really in-depth, beautiful characters. But now they're talking more in the political sphere, and people are going, whoa, this is not my Star Trek. Like, you're not flying around. You're not exploring. You're just kind of staying at the space station. So people didn't really like that. And the other thing, too, is in order to build that much depth in character and depth in, the environment, they had to do a lot of series, or what is that called? Arcs. like movie arcs, right? Or like series arcs, right? Where you're doing the no joke breadcrumbs, right? There's this instability happening on this local planet by the space station. Well, that instability, like, you can't have that instability come up one episode and then be done the next episode. Then what are they going to do? They're on a space station that doesn't move. So now they start having episode 1, explain a little bit more. Episode 2, explain a little more. Episode 3, and they keep building off of each other. So now these arcs are going across the seasons. But they don't want to cut into airtime. So they're not recapping every single time. So then now our people are getting more upset because they're going, not only are we missing out, you know what I mean? Because potentially if we miss an episode, we miss an episode. What just happened? Why are they, you know what I mean? Like, it's still like, it's got an episodic feel, but it's not. It's a series, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
So especially the first 2 seasons of Deep Space Nine, it has an episodic feel. There is like, you can kind of watch one-off ones and it's not that bad. But the second it gets to season like late 2 and on, they're in the Dominion War. You watch Into the Pale Moonlight, right?
Yes. Yep.
Remember how much explanation I had to give you for that episode?
To make sense, yeah.
To make sense, because there's
so
2
much that builds-
seasons. Yeah. There's 2 arcs almost, 2 seasonal arcs that actually build up to it. And now it's hilarious, just for a fun fact, because Deep Space Nine, just as everyone knows, is my favorite. They had a resurgence on love, because now with streaming services, you can pick and choose and you can watch everything, and people are now watching this full on, and everyone's going, oh my gosh. Because back in the day, you had to like record it on VHS, and if that doesn't work, then you gotta, hopefully one of your boys recorded it.
Well, it's amazing because, like you said, it's completely switched, because you said it was episodic. You just turn on the TV, it's whatever
whole family could watch it. Who cares?
But once a week, an episode dropped.
Yep.
Now with streaming service, people like to binge.
Oh yeah.
But now there's certain shows on streaming services that are going back to the once a week to keep you hooked on the streaming service. People are like, I just want to binge.
That.
Yeah. So that's what they expected. Now they hate it. And
it's so funny because people hate it now because they just go, oh, it's a cash grab. The streaming service wants you to have more months because they know if they drop a full series, people will watch it within the first week, and then they can cancel their streaming service. Yeah. And they go, well, we want you at least for 2 months to get our money back.
Yeah.
So then they, spread it out.
But, for 50,
which is hilarious.
50 years, because we paid monthly for cable, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like, so, yeah. Streaming services just redefine cable. I don't know. You know what I mean? Whatever. And so now we're getting back to it because now there's all these streaming services and they do blah, blah, blah. Whatever.
It's pretty much cable now. Yeah,
we're not even,
It's a full circle.
Yeah, full circle. It's a feedback loop. It keeps going. But yeah, that's where I think if I had to explain Deep Space Nine to someone, it is Captain Benjamin Sisko. He is a part of this station, and unlike the other 2 series where they're going around, they're exploring everything like that, it's so much more character-based. Now they're fleshing out like these worlds, right? There's multiple antagonists that happen in the Next Generation that they're in the Alpha Quadrant. They're Cardassians. Who are they? Now they're building them out in, the Next Generation. So yeah, Mark, you're smiling there about the whole Kardashians, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole point is that we talked offline about this on the podcast, but back in high school, basically we were in psychology class, we were talking about the Kardashians. Now this is like Kim and all them, right? And so they were talking about them, and I was so confused because I was like, did I miss this episode? Right? You know what I mean? Like, so I'm going over and I went to, the lady sitting next to me and I was like, hey, you know what I mean? Like, who's the Kardashians? Like, I'm getting confused. I'm like, you don't know who the Kardashians are? She said it loud enough for the teacher to be like, Tony, like, you live under a rock? Like, how do you not know who the Kardashians are? And then they said, well, just give it a guess. You got to know them from something, right? Because at this point, like, the Kardashians had their TV show, the makeup lines, whatever. There's so much going on there. And so basically I was like, you mean the aliens that hail from the planet Cardassia and, Deep Space Nine? And everyone's like, dude, what? You know what I mean? So I had no idea, right? So
was Josh in that class with you?
Oh, big time.
And he's just like,
oh, yeah. Yeah, he was.
I could see his face,
Yeah, and Elena was in that class too, so I was like, oh, jeez, Yeah, that was like one of our few classes in high school where all 3 together, which is ironic. It's kind of funny to think about. But whole point is, I didn't know. I knew more about the Cardassians, which are Star Trek, versus the Kardashians, which are the pop stars, whatever you want to call them, makeup entrepreneurs, whatever. Doesn't important. But point being is the fact that they are now building out these characters, these antagonists, and it's just it's a different feel of it. And now that with streaming services, I would like highly recommend it to anybody because you're not missing an episode, you're not missing all that, and there's so much. It's so good there. It's great. So now we're kind of going back during the same timeline, which is Voyager. So Voyager also had its ups and downs because they did the classic, it's kind of like Lost, where the second you start a TV show where there is now an end goal, you know they're not going to reach that end goal in the first season.
Right.
You know they're not going to reach the end goal in the second season. And you know, so the whole point is that Star Trek has always had 6 or 7 seasons. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 7. But the point is that they're in episode 5, they're like, because the whole point of Voyager, sorry, I should bring that back, is they're in the Alpha Quadrant. This is during, at the end of the Next Generation, start of Deep Space Nine. They're all kind of all the same timeline. But the ship gets launched out of the Alpha Quadrant to the Delta Quadrant. And it's a big deal because it would take them over 80 years. If they went as fast as physically possible in a straight line, no one affecting them, it would take them I think it's 86 years to get home. And it was a moral decision by the captain to basically, there's a situation. It's all in the pilot, so I'm not really spoiling that much.
Yeah.
But something transports them all the way over there, and it's her decision that causes them to be stranded out in the Delta. And now she has to build up her crew, and there's this other crew that got in. It's great, but now the whole point is their whole goal is to come back home. But that's where people, once again, they're now traveling. Right now they're getting back to Star Trek, which is now we have a starship that's out there exploring planets. But they're going, okay, we're not in the Alpha Quadrant anymore, so those aliens are tired and overused. Let's do brand new ones. So now we're going in the Delta Quadrant, and as they keep getting closer to the Alpha Quadrant, we can introduce new antagonists and new friends and companions. And so it was almost like it's almost like the executives were like, okay, we have Deep Space Nine, which is just a sit and duck. They're not doing anything. Now let's do Voyager, which they are literally traveling and they won't stop.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're not getting any repeats, right? You're not going to see a lot of these, they're literally characters, one-off alien species that are so then Voyager now has a really, truly episodic feel.
Yeah.
Where the breadcrumb is, they're just trying to get home.
You're right.
Not much going on. And there's not too much of a series. It's just, they're trying to get home. That's it. And so that one, it kind of brought back to Star Trek roots, which is I'm traveling back, I'm doing this.
Exploring planets.
Exploring planets, everything like that. So there's kind of where we're at on the overview. Mm-hmm. So Mark, right now, do you have any quick questions on that? Because there's a couple more, but I should probably break just to kind of explain this out because I think there's...
Not on the timeline. I have a couple random questions, though, that fit into it, though. So my first question is, you said there was a movie that covered Class B and C.
Oh yeah, well there's they reference it. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Were there distinct captains for each class? Is that how that?
Yes.
Okay.
So there are distinct captains of each class, and the whole shtick was I think on the B or C, I can't remember. I think it was C. Whole point is that, by the way, there's these series and then there's movies in between these series. Mm-hmm. And Star Trek original series had 5 movies, 7 movies. They had a lot of movies, but I will say this. Star Trek historically has done a horrible job with movies. If you look at any of their movies, not a lot of them break IMDb. Star Wars, I mean, their bread and butter is movies, and the series are the real fans watch the series kind of deals. I'm calling people out right now, but I don't mean to call people out, but you know what I mean?
The serious,
the serious people who are really dedicated in fleshing out the story, they'll watch the series. Whereas the opposite, where Star Trek, every single time they try to make a movie, it's just not there. You know what I mean? It's something about it. They do a lot of fan service, which is good, but at the same time too, they've never really had a good whopping movie, right? Because no one goes in oh my gosh, let me watch. The most notable movie anyone would know is Wrath of Khan. But that's just because they had such a great, Khan Noonien Zune was such a good character, and there's a lot more there. But the point is, there's one dime in the rough kind of deal. But with that movie, they do a lot of, Sulu's, niece or something is now the helm. And there's, a little, one-off being, I think this is in Star Trek Generations, where basically Captain Picard and Captain Kirk interact with each other. There's this alien space anomaly which traps Kirk in this time nexus. And basically Picard is... Or how does that work? The whole point is that they interact. They interact.
Is it live action? So it's So it's Patrick Stewart and
William Shatner.
Yeah,
William Shatner. And so And the whole shtick is that I think, because the whole shtick is that Kirk is retiring. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Okay, I got it right. I don't know why I second guessed myself. Kirk's retiring, and he's giving off. So it is the B. So it's the NCC 1701 B, is the ship, and they're on their maiden voyage, and they run into this space anomaly. But the whole point is, before they go on their maiden voyage, they're like, he's meeting all the crew. Right, so he meets the captain, he meets this, he meets the helmsman, and she goes, "Oh, I'm something Sulu," and he's like, "I've always said, there's no Enterprise without a Sulu behind the helm." So it's like that kind of like fancy, you know what I mean? Like so they're
even
like,
though him and George Takei really didn't like each other.
Yeah. The character, they're actors,
the actors, not the characters.
But then what ended up happening is he gets trapped in space anomaly. Years pass. Now we're at Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart then experiences the same space anomaly and goes back, and then they see each other, like, Patrick Stewart and William Shatner, and they have to, do everything like that. So the whole point is like, that was a pretty solid movie. It wasn't like great, but it was all right. Yeah. But my point is that there is some explanation, but nowhere near enough like a full series.
Okay, gotcha.
But
okay, my other ones are, I'll save them to the end because it's
perfect,
kind of overarching.
Okay,
so
golden.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we get a really big left turn, right? I thought, we kind of, because it's kind of like this weird rubber band effect, right? So we kind of had the original, we caught lightning in the bottle. We really caught lightning in the bottle with the steroid version with the Next Generation. Now we kind of pedaled out a little bit with Deep Space Nine, even though it had a really big resurgence 10 years down the line. But let's just talk about here and now. So then they did Voyager, kind of, because they wanted to do something that was parallel but opposites of each other. So now Deep Space Nine is for the really hardcore character builders. Voyager's for the really big episodic, I just want to experience new aliens. And they're happening at the same time, which is really cool, because there's literally a point where I was born on a Voyager episode, which is crazy to think about. I think it's season 2, episode 1. Is on my birthday, which is kind of cool. I might be getting it wrong, but But point is like, it's cool to watch like something that released on your birthday. You're like, oh my gosh, this is 20 whatever years old, and so. But the point is that now they had all that stuff, and now they're kind of doing what George Lucas is doing. Is going, wow, we're filling out a little bit. Like Star Trek inherently has an infinite amount of space, right? You could always go to another quadrant. Yep. You can always explore something else. But you kind of run the risk of over squeezing. So what do? Let's backfill a little bit. So they decided we're going to release a series called Enterprise. And the Enterprise is before James T. Kirk got on the 1701, NCC 1701. It was before Pike even got on the NCC 1701. This is like Neil Armstrong level. These were the first people to go out and explore, and their now ship is called the NX Enterprise. So it's like not a Galaxy class cruiser, it's a smaller version, but it's like the precursor. So now we're like Star Wars in the sense of now we're doing prequels.
Yeah.
So now we're filling out like what's going on. So for example, the whole shtick is that this is during a movie, during the original series, but the whole reason why we have warp technology, that's like the biggest thing. Warp technology is like your ticket into knowing the universe. So that's why they're saying, like, we don't know anything about aliens because we haven't developed warp technology. But the second we develop warp technology, then we're going to be interconnected to everybody. That's how Star Trek kind of works.
Yeah.
So we, as humans, developed the first warp. Like, it's like warp 1. Yeah. It's like, us going Mach 1 for the first time. You know what I mean? Like, we broke the sound barrier. It's crazy. And so we did warp 1, and the Vulcans are the aliens that were like, hey, you passed the test. You passed the first barrier.
Yeah.
Great to meet you. And that's how it ends. This isn't a movie. And then now they play out their series. So now they're going, ooh, that's interesting.
So is this years before Pike or like recent?
Way before. This is before Starfleet was even made.
Okay.
This is an entrepreneur, kind of like Elon Musk. Just a billionaire who's like, let's see what's going on. Yeah. And so basically that's what ends up happening. So then they're going, but then how did we jump from that to this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, granted, at the point, Star Trek: The Original Series was first created. So Starfleet and this starship was always in mind. George, I keep saying George. Gene Roddenberry always had that in mind. Then a movie went back once, had a one touch point, kind of like Back to the Future. Like literally went back in time one time, showed this event, and then they kept going. But then that's when the showrunners were like, oh, wow, that's actually a good point. It's already canon that this self-made, engineer created warp, which caused the Vulcans to come down. How did we go from this individual meeting Vulcans for the first time to Starfleet? Like, that's a crazy jump. Like, this is a whole, like, that's like a, branch of our military coming out. Like, how does that happen? So then they're like, okay, let's make Enterprise, which is that series. So now it's like a full precursor. So now it's like, hey, we made the Zefram Cochrane, who's the guy. He made the first warp jump. Vulcans are now there. But now the Vulcans are being weenies. The Vulcans are coming in and they're kind of being like, they see humans as inferior because they are inferior technically by their physical, emotional, and, brainiac abilities. And they're going, okay, then they're kind of like making it barriers. And they're getting frustrated because man is trying to come out and break this, be explorers. They want to be explorers. So what does that look like? And the Vulcans are kind of holding them back. And it's like this whole back and forth. But it's really interesting because now you're seeing, not only is this starship building up, but you're seeing humanity come up and like kind of meet the task at hand.
Yeah.
And then also while they're doing that, they experience things that are going like, ooh, we messed up. Like Archer is the captain. Captain Jonathan Archer. And he's looking at it and going like, wow. There's like an episode where like he has to do something to save the human race. But in order to do that, he has to take a part from this allied vessel. Or not allied, but random vessel. And he's basically a pirate now. He literally has to take that part. He's going to strand them, almost like Voyager, where it's going to take them 5 years to get back home. Like their ship will operate, but it'll take them 5 years to get back home. And he has to make the decision to basically take that part, put it in his ship, so then he can go save the human race. But he's going at what cost?
Yeah.
I literally just condemned 100 souls on a 5-year journey, and now they're going to hate me. But now I muddied everybody because now I'm representing the human race. So we need to have rules to figure this out. And that's where you get the Prime Directive. That's like Starfleet's bread and butter.
Yes.
Like, you're not supposed to, any pre-warp technology, or you're not supposed to interfere. Like, we're not supposed to play God.
Yeah.
Like, the Vulcans could came in and play God. Like, right now, an alien species can come in and give us all their technology, but then we're, like, kind of bound by that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a way they don't want to go into. And that's why they're trying to avoid it. And that's where he's, like, Jonathan Archer is kind of going, we need to make a system. We need to make a society. We need to make an organization with these rules so we don't fall, like, you know what I mean? Like, my back was against the wall. I had to do this. Mm-hmm. But did I have to? Like, did I really have to? You know what I mean? So, like, they're just trying to, the ends don't always justify the means. We have to figure out what we can do in this world, right? We have to have rules on our exploration. And so that's, like, kind of like the build-up, right? That's, like, a whole series.
Yeah.
Only problem is it did not do too hot. Meaning all the other series so the original series got 3 seasons. 3 or 4. I think 3. But everything else got 6 or 7 seasons.
Right.
This one only got, like, 3 seasons, I think. I think it's 3. I can go back. I probably should have notes, but like I said, we've known it or not.
Yeah.
But I think it's 3. It's 3 series, and so like it was good. I really liked it. Actually, that was one of the first series Jenna ever watched. That's actually what got her into it because she never knew Star Trek. Mm-hmm. But Star Trek was on when we were growing up. Like if we turn on the Sci-Fi Channel, if a Star Trek episode was on, it was Enterprise.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about.
That is crazy.
So yeah, I remember my first ever Star Trek episode was 2. It was at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Downstairs, Chris put it on. We were really young, but that was a Next Generation episode. And it was a movie. So it wasn't a series, it was a movie. I can't remember what movie it was. I remember the scene. It's when, oh my gosh, Geordi LaForge doesn't have his visor anymore because they did his optic replacement. Mm-hmm. So I got to remember what movie that was. I can't remember. But the whole point is that was the first ever Star Trek piece I ever watched. It was like ingrained. I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? And then the other one was, I was literally coming home from school, turning the Sci-Fi Channel, and it was Enterprise.
Did you ever tell Chris that he's the one who got you into
No,
Star Trek?
now that I'm thinking about it, as I just said that, I should text him. Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll see him this
I'll
summer.
tell you, I'll talk to him during Mossfest, but I'll mention it to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he was big, and no, it was crazy to think about. But yeah, that was literally, it was at Grandma and Grandpa's house.
So it's weird because, not weird, but it's interesting, and maybe that's why, but because in the original series, Vulcans are the one that are kind of looked down upon, right? Or maybe it's just Spock because he's half and half?
Spock, because here's the thing, Spock, because he has animosity from both. Vulcans are going, whole point about Vulcans, actually pretty quick precursor. Sorry, every single time I explain your question, I answer your question. There's a little bit more, but there's a lot here.
It's good.
Because here's the thing: Vulcans, in and of themselves, were exactly like humans. They're a savage race where they did unspeakable things to each other, and it was just they were ruled by emotions, and everything was going crazy. Until some of their scholars were like, "Yo, we are too temperamental and too destructive as a race." So even more so than humans, like they were like worse, way worse, like up to their own devices. So they, as philosophers, were like, we need to do something about this. So we're going to do something called Kolinar, which is I almost said Ponfar, which is their mating ritual. Hide then, but no, we need to do Kolinar, which is just repress all emotion. So whenever you see a Vulcan, they're very like Captain illogical or fascinating. Like they keep the same tone. Man, maybe I should be a Vulcan voice actor, but they keep the same tone and everything. And the whole point is like they're repressing all those emotions. So the problem with that is they've done this for hundreds of years. And they basically made this utopian society where they figured out replication, they figured out warp travel, and now they're kind of deeming themselves as the self-righteous people that they are. Like, we're above our own emotions, right? Mm-hmm. And so then they see humans, especially, you know what I mean, with the first warp drive.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, you finally got to the first warp drive, that's great. And then they start interacting with the humans, and then they start going, ugh. Like, we don't have emotions, so we don't have outbursts like that. You know what I mean? Like, so they're kind of like, it's almost like the human nature reminds them of their own nature, mm-hmm. but they beat their nature. So therefore, they're kind of like looking at it like, oh, we're better than you kind of deal. So whenever there's an emotional outburst, they like immediately shut down. They like, you know, almost like ridicule whoever did it, right? Yeah. Captain Benjamin Sisko, his arch nemesis is a Vulcan. Because their philosophies in life just differ so much, and they have it out for each other. Yeah. But same thing. Whenever Spock says anything, and the Vulcan really wants to get under their skin, they're like, "Ooh, I sense some emotion there." And Spock's like, "Bro, you know what I mean?" Like they're dogging on his human side. Yeah. So there's where the animosity is there. Now the human animosity is frustrating. Can you imagine being with someone who has no emotion? Like, right. You can literally watch it in these series where it's just like, even in the best of times and the worst of times, you're never getting emotion. They're totally honest. And to be honest, in a weird way, what healthy human, like, wants that 24/7?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because there's sometimes where, like, you don't want a solution to the problem. You just want someone to hear you out. And a Vulcan's not going to, like, hear you out. Mm-hmm. They're going to be like, they're not going to also validate you anyway. They're just going to be like, hey, you're too emotional right now. Like, who wants to hear that in a situation kind of deal? And so I think that's where, like, the humans almost get frustrated with the Vulcans. And also there's a pent-up animosity because they held them back, right? Mm-hmm. Also, that's like a plot point in Enterprise where Captain Jonathan Archer's dad is the one who actually made the engine, who, like, perfected, you know, whatever that guy's name is. I can't remember. I said it earlier. But the whole point is that he perfected his engine and made it better. But the Vulcans were holding it back so much. But by the time that engine actually met space, Jonathan Archer's dad passed away. Wow, yeah. But there's no other like, they could have done tests and they could have done everything. But the Vulcans were classic, being like, you guys aren't ready. Emotionally, you guys aren't ready. Technologically, they were. But they were going, ooh, emotionally, you're not ready. So that's like really, you know. Yeah. Pent-up animosity. So, yeah, that's where kind of all that brings in. But then that's where we have, like, these overarching things, right? And that's like, if someone says Star Trek, that's like the Star Trek to me, growing up and covering everything. That's like the big series. Now there's some new series coming out. Discovery, once again, now we're really getting into, it's no longer episodic. It's very series based. Now they're focusing on all the FX and like they're making the ships look really pretty at the downfall kind of some writing. Mm-hmm. That's what kind of bugs me. Like this Discovery stuff, it's like, Jason Isaacson Discovery, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Lucius Malfoy. He's the captain. Yeah. So... well, in part of it, but the whole point is like, yeah, they're kind of losing a little bit, and they kind of redeem themselves. I don't want to say here and there. I think they're still fun to watch. I don't want to dog on it too hard, but that one, the whole point is like for Discovery, they find a new way to travel, which is through like basically it's mycelia, which is just, you know, fungus. But basically they find out like warp. They literally create a warp bubble and they travel throughout the world. You know, they travel throughout space. But now with Mycelia, they basically the Mycelia network, which is like basically this theorized thing where basically there's like biophysics that it's almost like string theory. There's basically like this mycelia that makes these networks all the way throughout the world. Or sorry, I keep saying world, throughout the universe. And the point is that you can basically enter the mycelia network and exit to it instantaneously. So that means that ship can be anywhere at once. So instead of traveling, so like Voyager, for example, they can do warp, but that warp's only so quick, so it's going to take them 87 years to get home. Where the mycelia network, they could literally just enter the network and be at home in the blink of an eye. Like, that's a whole stick. And so, like, that's a very dangerous technology, and there's a lot of build-up, and that's where that's going. And then the only one, like, the new Star Trek I really like is actually Lower Decks. It's animated, it's a little goofy, it's, like, supposed to be funny, but that's truly episodic.
Yeah.
Where they're just, like, it's Star Trek in its essence. So it's episodic. They're hitting these things. But the point is that they do the best fan service because they make Star Trek jokes for the Star Trek watch. Like, if you watch Star Trek and you watch Lower Decks, you literally cannot tell me you don't like it because the guy makes, like, the writers are brilliant, one. Two, Zefram Cochrane. That's what I was thinking of. That was the guy who made the engine. But point is that, the reason why I thought about it is Cochrane, which was on Survivor. He's a legendary guy in Survivor. He writes for Lower Decks.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's one of the first shows that remember how he was like, oh, I'm going to Harvard Law, and he stops to become a TV writer? He writes for Lower Decks. So he wrote one of my favorite episodes in Lower Decks, which is the Deep Space Nine episode.
Oh, nice.
They do an episode where they visit Deep Space Nine. So point is that they have so much great fan service. It's so funny. It's like I literally can't get enough of that. It's great.
Yeah.
So I really do enjoy that. But that's kind of all this series, honestly, Mark. I mean, there's like more I can kind of go into because there's also Picard.
I was going to ask, what about because that's essentially just a reboot with Patrick Stewart.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot going on with that one.
Is that over or is it still going?
Yeah, it's over. Yeah, they had it like they were getting first of all they started in the pandemic, which was tough. So then like you can kind of tell the way they shot things and the way they have the scenes and everything, it's a little bit wonky. But then so they had they ended it up. So I can't remember if it got 3 seasons or 4 seasons, but yeah, there's a couple of that too. I watched a little bit of it. I kind of didn't really enjoy it all that much.
Is he so what is it? It's him in retirement life? Is he still on the ship?
Yep, it's him in retirement life. But, of course, like, there's external factors that bring him back into the fold. But he doesn't want to be a captain anymore. So he's doing, like, a renegade ship where it's, like, this kind of like a Han Solo-esque smuggler.
Yeah.
And they're the ship, and he's kind of making him good, and, you know what I mean, vice versa, and, stuff like that. So
Gotcha.
And then, like, one of his old like, number 2s is, like, left Starfleet. And then is now joined it. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. It's interesting. I don't want to downplay it. There's really cool episodes into it, but like I said, those were like kind of the newer ones where, I'm more when I say Star Trek and I think about it, I'm way more into those series I talked about, which was Enterprise. Oh, by the way, let's go timeline really quick. If we do Stardate timelines, it goes Enterprise, the original series, then it goes Next Generation, and then Deep Space Nine and Voyager are co-located. Then, if you do release-wise, it's the original series, Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and then Enterprise. And now that I'm thinking about it, let's go back one more. If we do Stardate, technically it goes Enterprise, then it goes Discovery, and then it goes original series because Discovery is in between those two.
Yeah.
So.
Because they're discovering new technology.
And they kind of like, that's the other thing too, they kind of try, that's the tough part about Discovery is because they put it in between those two very established time points, but you never hear Discovery. You also never hear of some of the aliens on that ship. You also never hear that, but they're like, hey, this is top secret Starfleet technology, and here's this, and here's this. So they're like trying to play the line. They toe the line.
Yeah, that's always the issue with trying to fit something in from 60s or 70s. I mean, Star Wars runs into that a lot too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it really does, and that's where like Rogue One did such a good job at going in between those movies. Yeah. Oh, so good. But yeah, that's where it's an issue, right? You know what I mean? I think whenever you go in between established timelines, you kind of have to do something funky or creative. And I think that's why, like, J.J. Abrams, like, they say the best Star Trek movies to watch are the J.J. Abrams ones. The reason why is because they take the old movies and they do a spin on them. where, something happens in the future and Spock comes back in the past he has to enter a black hole, whole 9 yards. But basically starts off what they call the Kelvin timeline, where it basically diverges. And so now here's the normal timeline with, everything going on. There's a divergence, and then those movies are in the divergence. So now they kind of have creative freedom to now do like homages to, like the Wrath of Khan and everything like that. But they're in their own timeline, so they're not messing with anything.
Yeah.
But also people don't like that because now it's like, wait, so you just split? Like Star Trek's already hard to figure out. Now you're saying that there's basically a canon timeline, and then the other offshoot, which is still canon, but it's called a Kelvin timeline. So it gets a little funky, but
that's with like Chris Pine and stuff.
Yes, Zachary Quinto as Spock. And
do you have any idea why they only brought Leonard Nimoy back and not William Shatner?
That is a really good question. I don't know. I really don't know. I was thinking about that too when it originally happened. Which, oh, by the way, the one thing that did come out of that movie was the title sequence of the original series and Next Generation starts off with the captain saying, space, the final frontier, that whole paragraph. And during that movie, since Leonard Nimoy came back, Leonard Nimoy says it. And it's the best rendition. Oh, Leonard Nimoy, he was ripping cigs for 30 years.
Yeah.
He has a great voice. You know what I mean? If it doesn't kill you, I would rip cigs to make my voice sound like that. That'd be sick. I don't. Listeners, we're not telling you to do that. But I'm just saying, the timbre and the rust, but he does a great rendition of that. But I don't know why. I really don't. I don't know if that was a contract thing or they wrote it in where, here's the thing. It makes sense why James T. Kirk's not in it, right? So if you actually, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, this actually does make sense. So first and foremost, Vulcans have a much longer timeline or lifespan than humans. So I think this is after James T. Kirk died. Mm-hmm. But caveat, James T. Kirk technically didn't die, but he was lost in action during that one movie. Remember I told you he gets lost in Space Anomaly, he goes into Nexus. Basically, he saves the ship by sacrificing himself, but he goes into the anomaly, and that's when Patrick Stewart comes in. Mm-hmm. And so technically, it's one of those weird things where James T. Kirk technically doesn't die, but then he comes back.
Well, if it's a space anomaly, it's one of the movies has it. It's this guy jumps 30 years and he thinks he's still attacking the same Vulcan or the same Earth.
Yeah.
That he was 30 years. It's
the Romulan. Oh yeah,
Romulan,
you did watch it.
Yeah.
You did watch. I
watched the movies. I watched.
I didn't know that. The Romulans,
Clinton.
exactly. The Romulan. Yeah. And that's why they're doing so well. It's a mining vessel, but they're able to kill everybody because it's they've got technology from 30 years in the future. But I think that's where it's tough. I don't know why. They could have done something like that.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think of lore reasons why they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. But yeah, some of those old movies are actually really funny if you watch them back. There's one where they figure out these two whales basically populate the Earth in some way, and they go back in time, and they gotta do this, but it's the whole center is around these two whales. It's what the hell? What? I don't get it. Yeah. So, but yeah, the movies are all right. But yeah, the 2009. Well, they call it Star Trek 2009 because that's when it released. That was the one that you're referring to. Yeah, that was a pretty good one. But
2009 is that really?
I know. Isn't that crazy? Dude, I'll never forget another story. Quick story about that was I'll never forget. I came back from Star Trek Into Darkness, which is the sequel to that movie, and I remember I ended up watching that movie, and I remember getting physically choked up because there's a flip in there, right? And this is Star Trek's very near and dear to me, and I've seen Wrath of Khan. I know what happens. By the way, I can do spoilers. It's fine. Whole point of Wrath of Khan is Spock sacrifices himself to save the ship, and the whole point is James T. Kirk does a very clever way, but he smuggles weapons into Khan Noonien Zune, which is he's the Wrath of Khan, right? Mm-hmm. He's the antagonist, and so but William Shatner does a really bait and switch, and Leonard Nimoy sacrifices himself. That's how the movie goes. Star Trek Into Darkness flips that, so now Zachary Quinto, who is Spock, sacrifices himself to save. Is the captain.
Yeah,
and does the bait and switch, and now Captain Kirk is the one who sacrifices himself, Chris Pine, and I think that is what really got me because it was just they literally as Chris Pine's dying, he's this is what you would have done, and this is what I would. You know what I mean? Like they like recognize that like the other person, because the whole thing is
that
like
character did do it.
Yeah, the character did do it, and also is like even more deeper because like the reason why Spock did that bait and switch is because Kirk would do that bait and switch, and he was inspired by his friend, and also on top of that too, Khan Noonien Zun, which is he's like a superhuman. They basically had like this eugenics war. Basically, that meant that like they beefed up humanity. And people got really, whoa, we should not be messing with the human genome. Like, these were superhumans. Like, they made them stronger, faster, smarter. And people were going, like, it's kind of like the classic, like, whoa, like, you can't do, like, there's, like, classic sci-fi tropes, right? Like, robots taking over the singularity and, like, messing with the human genome so much so, like, you don't recognize the humanity anymore. And so, basically, that's what ends up happening. Like, these eugenics wars where basically these kids were getting genetically altered. And then they started growing up, and they're going like, well, we're better than everybody. Why do we have to listen to you? And then the normal people are like, whoa, don't say that. And then they got into a huge war, a huge fight. And so he is one of the... But the whole point is that these guys are super smart. And he knows Vulcans can't lie. But Spock's half Vulcan. So he's like, oh, you know what I mean? The greatest Texas Hold'em player, poker player I know is James T. Kirk. He would do this bait and switch. Also, so like... Basically, that whole scene was like a 4-dimensional chess set.
Yeah.
Because he's like, you know what I mean? Oh, it's so good. It's just so prime. And then, of course, Kirk sacrificing himself. He's like, he's just so, not like self-centered, but like, he's the captain of the ship. But, you know, I don't know. It's just, it was just, yeah, it was great. I really like it. And then, you know, whole needs of the many outweighs the needs of the few or the one. That's like a very classic Spock thing. And when he dies, everyone quotes it. But yeah, no, it was such a good movie. But I remember coming back from that movie. And my brother had his friends, and there was a boy-girl party. It was a really big, you know what I mean?
Oh,
in high school, and there was boys and girls. So it was at our house, and I came back from that movie. And, of course, like, all these guys were trying to talk to all these girls kind of deal. And everyone was just like, dude, like, you know, why weren't you here kind of deal? And I was like, dude, I was watching this movie, and I started getting, like, super amped about it. Exactly what I'm talking, like, right now. Like, I just got amped. Like, oh, my gosh, they're playing 40 chess. You know what I mean? And I'm, like, explaining it. And I remember Josh came by and, like, nudged me hard because he was getting frustrated because none of the girls were talking with the guy. You know what I mean? And so I might have been taking the stage a little too long. But people were genuinely interested, and they were asking me questions. And, like, I think I almost inspired other people to watch that movie because of that. So, I thought it was really funny just to think back and just to dog on Josh a little bit more. That'd be kind of fun. But, you got the psychology story, and now you got the boy-girl party story, which is kind of funny to think back. Yeah, that goes to show you, anyone out there, you know what I mean, confidence and really true passion really gets you far, and people will listen to you and enjoy what you're having to say if you're really kind of putting yourself out there. And also as a high schooler, going in front of a group of girls and being like, yeah, man, I was crying, you know what I mean? Oh, you know what I mean? Like, probably didn't help my stock all that much, but, you know, I still had fun. It was a lot of fun explaining that and have that story. But, no, this stuff means a lot, and if it shapes you in a way where you're like watching it as a high schooler like I did, it's like so crazy. Like that was almost more influential than like people look back at coaches and stuff from like sports and you know what I mean, like and everything like that. But I almost look back at that as like fondly as like a sport. You know, it's like a coach. You know what I mean? You're literally forming your moral compass around a show that is at its face value just providing entertainment, but in reality, there's a lot more going on if you take the time to look at it deeply, like I did. I don't know. I feel like I very intertwined with it. But
yeah.
Do you have any boy-girl parties where you talked about Star Trek or Star Wars?
No, we didn't talk about Star Trek or Star Wars. No, the only boy-girl parties I went to in high school were musical related.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, you already got some
cast
to talk
parties,
about.
Cast
Yeah,
parties.
yeah, those are fun.
Yeah.
You did Les Mis. That was one heck of a show. Yeah. That was fun.
Those could get
You
wild.
were guard.
Cast parties.
Yeah.
Constable number 2.
Yeah, okay. Constable. Oh, yeah, nice. Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, so Mari, do you have any other questions? Like we kind of covered, that's like Star Trek as an overview.
Yeah.
I kind of like feel bad. That's much longer than an elevator pitch, but you kind of see what I'm getting at through each one. I didn't want to spend the time to talk about captains or storylines because that's like way too much. I just want to kind of give you a feel of it because like, I don't know, that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you did a really good job. I have my question. I asked you at the beginning who the George Lucas is, and you told me Gene Roddenberry. Is there a Dave Filoni now, though? Who has picked up is there someone who picked up the baton? Like, you see his name on it, and you're like, or his or her name.
Yeah,
and you're like, that's going to be a good one.
It's really funny. They have the inverse. They have the Kathleen Kennedy.
Oh no,
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
And I see that, I'm like, oh, I see that person. The funniest thing is, I used to remember their names. I don't even remember now. I literally have to Google this because
So Kathleen Kennedy, for our listeners, is for Star Wars. She's the president of Lucasfilm, and her projects don't tend to do well.
No. Yeah, it's Mike McCannon.
Okay.
So he's the No, sorry. Let me back up. He's the Dave Filoni.
He is okay.
He's the Dave Filoni. He's the creator of Lower Decks. He gets it. So he also wrote Solar Opposites. So he's been this. By the way, Lower Decks is an animation too.
Yeah.
So they have more liberties. They can do a lot more, and they explore stuff. But Mike McCannon. Yeah, I think I'm saying that. McCannon. Yeah, I'm saying that right. But the whole point is that he's the man. If I see anything with his name on it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be absolutely sick. And I think the only problem with Star Trek 2 is that a lot of those writers and showrunners retired. I mean, this was their baby and their golden goose. So a lot of the writers that were on the original series weren't really there for the Next Generation.
Yeah.
Next Generation had some overlap with Voyager and Deep Space Nine, but then they kind of went. Then there's a break, and then they did Enterprise, but that was a different set of writers. So there's been really. So it's not as tight. You know what I mean? I feel like Dave Filoni and George Lucas and Jon Favreau is kind of, he's a new kid on the block, but still they've been around there for a really long time. Where I feel like these ones kind of had a little bit more, not flash in the bucket that demeans their work, but you know what I mean? They were just, that was kind of their. Once again, it's like stovepipe, right?
Yeah.
I kind of brought up in the beginning, there's these very big stovepipe timelines that they worked on and then they're done with it, But yeah, there's a couple other ones, the Discovery one, those writers, the first season, the two showrunners, Alex Kurtzman, and there's one other person, I can't remember her name, but both of them, it got to a point where they were having yelling matches with the writers because the writers were getting really frustrated. They're like, this is not what Star Trek's about. And then they were trying to do Kathleen Kennedy, put their own agenda on a lot of this stuff. And they're losing what it really meant to be in an episode, what it meant to be in Star Trek. You just can't put characters in there. It's not about that.
Yeah.
People will accept characters if you write the characters well enough.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. I feel like that's where if I had to get on my rant again, and this is not a rant episode, but that'd be my main thing where if you write a well enough character with motives and reasons and everything like that, people will go in with it 100%. You might have one or two people who don't like it, but you know what I mean? So they're throwing a lot of characters in there that really weren't driving and it wasn't really good, and they're just kind of there to be there, and it's I don't know, it really didn't do well. But they had no joke, there was legal action taken against the writing staff and the showrunners.
Wow, yeah.
So much so that I think season 2 they took out one of the showrunners. She was off the the woman, I can't remember her name is, but she was completely off the billet. They didn't even include her.
Wow.
And I think Alex Kurtzman was still on there, but I think they phased them out. But regardless, it literally got to a point where.
Yeah.
I think these studio executives were kind of driving with the producers, but then the writers were really keeping their ground, which is great. And a lot of the best parts about that series, you could tell, comes through the writing. You know what I mean? Or at least what they said. Because there's also these writers were on Reddit were I don't like this and X, Y, and Z after it got released, which is kind of a no-brainer. Because it's us going and we send in a project and then we tell the customer hey, by the way, just to let you know this sub process, it wasn't me. That was the other guy. They're trash. Yeah, kind of deal. So kind of a bad look, but yeah, regardless, Mark. So yeah, with that being said, you got anything else? I think that really covered everything. I literally think covered over 50 years of material, maybe more.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
60s, late 60s, 70s. Yeah, probably over 50 years. Yeah, wow. Yeah. Oh, that was 50 years worth.
There you go.
So yeah, no, I appreciate it, Mark. Appreciate you sitting through that. And also, I really appreciate you bringing this up because I've always wanted to do this one, but I was I don't know. But when you brought it up, I was oh, this is perfect. You gave me my green light, and I needed a green light. So yes. I appreciate it. So.
No problem. Well, next week's my week, so it's
I know. I'm so excited. I'm very excited. So
I'm not going to tell you guys what it is, and I'm not spoiling it.
Yeah, leave it. Yeah, leave it out. Yeah, it'll be golden.
Yeah, I think that's it. So. Thanks, everyone, for listening. As always, please reach out to us with questions, mix-up ideas, what-if ideas, any topics you guys want us to cover, or anything.
Yeah, we always take Star Trek topics. That's, you got more. But no, if you want to reach out, please reach out on Twitter, X, or Instagram at the Live That Floor Pod. Or you can also email us at the livelaughfloorpod@gmail.com. That's livelaughfloorpod@gmail.com.
Thanks, guys.